Once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
What's going on YouTube? Diggy546. Definitely hit that subscribe button if you're new. Like the video if you like the video, and I won't tell if you click that bell. But let's go ahead and get into this. So I wanted to make a couple give my opinion pretty much on the Giants going out and hiring the Eagles director of player personnel, Brandon Brown. Now, Brandon Brown kind of came out of left field. Nobody was expecting Brandon Brown to just be lured over to the Giants from the Eagles. It was technically a promotion because he went from director of player personnel to assistant GM. And it makes me think, does Joe Schoen kind of want to bring somebody on that, he believes in, that pretty much could serve that same role that he served to Brandon Beane? That's what I'm thinking is happening here. He's going to have Brandon Brown doing all the things that he used to do in Buffalo, and he thought that he was the best person for the job. He probably looked around the organization. I mean, who do you have there? Kevin Abrams isn't really an evaluator. He's there for the cap, and I'll get to Kevin Abrams in a second. If you look around, there's not really much there as far as like high caliber, high caliber guys in that front office that is really sought after in the rest of the league. So they went out, looked at Brandon Brown. I don't think he's worked anywhere with Brandon Brown before. They probably have run into each other as far as scouts, as far as like, going out and scouting places. They probably have ran into each other and he probably knows of them. But I don't think they work together. But this is an interesting hire. They went and got him from the Eagles. The Eagles, you can say what you want about them, but they're usually really strong in the trenches no matter what, no matter when. They always got something down in the trenches, and that's usually how they end up beating us, is because they're usually stronger on the offensive and defensive line. And that's kind of why they made the playoffs last year, because their lines of scrimmage were so strong. And they've just been that way for the past like 10, 15 years. And they never really takes a dip for more than a year. So really, really strong hire. I kind of like it. Of course, he took that promotion. Kevin Abrams moved away from being that assistant manager to now he's a senior vice president of football operations and strategy. That just essentially means he manages the cap. And I've been trying to tell people all this time, stop throwing things at Kevin Abrams. Stop blaming everything on Kevin Abrams. Kevin Abrams is specifically there to help whoever the GM is manage the cap. And he does it at a very high level. And people say, but Diggy, the cap space is at 13,000. The Giants have no cap space. Guess what? Kevin Abrams, proving that he did not have any personnel power. Kevin Abrams has to do whatever the general manager says. It's just his job to make sure that it can fit under the cap. All of the magic that you were congratulating Dave Gettleman for and saying that Dave Gettleman was able to fit all these contracts under the cap and that Jerry Reese was able to fit all these contracts under the cap, that happened because of the brilliance, the cap brilliance of Kevin Abrams. And Kevin Abrams is a well-respected, he's the premier. I'm not sure if he's the premier, but he's one of the top cap specialists in the entire league. So that's why he stays here no matter who the general manager is, because he's great at managing the cap. We never are in a situation where we just can't do something because of our cap space, because we have someone who knows how to manage the money. So Kevin Abrams will stay here. He's been with the Giants for 23 years. He's been an assistant GM for 20 years. And it just shows you, obviously, he's not going to be a GM. He's not going to be a GM because if he were to be a GM and all the years that the Giants were winning and the Giants were competitive, he's been here for 20 years and he hasn't been hired as a GM somewhere else. So it shows specifically what his job is, and that's why he's continued to stay here. So that's my mini rant on Kevin Abrams out of the way. I just hope people understand what his actual role is. He has not been evaluating players. He's just there for the cap. Moving on with Brandon Brown, though, I got the chance to listen to a couple of interviews and look up some things on him. One thing that was really stood out to me is Jordan Mailata, the Eagles left tackle, who I think has a really bright future, 6'8", 365. He was drafted in the 7th round, and Brandon Brown was key. He was pretty much his guy. He was key in making that selection. Brandon Brown pretty much was the guy that said, listen, we need to make sure we get this guy because he can be a really good player. And the Eagles drafted him in 2018. I think 2020, he started to get some playing time. and he struggled a little bit, but he was getting better. And in 2021, he was named the starter, and he looks like one of the best left tackles in pro football. Now, obviously, we're not getting Jordan Mailata with Brandon Brown, but it's showing that he was able to identify a guy, know his coaching staff, get Jordan Mailata developed, and a 7th-round pick becomes your franchise left tackle who got a long-term deal. So that's a really good find by him. That's one of the only players that I could see like was really connected to him. Of course, some other players that they have that are good probably were connected to him, but that's one that I know definitively was connected. He talked about how he builds a roster. He talked about how he wanted to build a roster on concrete instead of sand. Now, that means that he wants to build a roster with depth, which is something the Giants general managers just have not been able to figure out. You can't just have great players and then horrible players, or players that you think are great but end up just being good and then horrible players. Because when those players go down, the horrible players end up playing. And we've known for years, Giants fans have seen this. When the horrible players get out there, your team is horrible. Doesn't matter who you have ahead of them. Once those good players get injured, you got horrible guys behind them. The Eagles and a ton of teams in the league, when their starters get hurt, you see a ton of backups come in there and play almost as good as the starters, or play just not horribly. And that's something that Brandon Brown believes in. And that's also something that Joe Schoen believes in. And that's why I think they pretty much are in lockstep with each other. I think this was a great hire because he pretty much just reaffirms, he pretty much just talks exactly like how Joe Schoen would talk. In fact, when I was hearing the interview, I'm like, maybe we should have interviewed this guy to be GM too. I do like Joe Schoen as a candidate better because of the experience, but just listening to him talk, you probably would want him to be your GM. Now, he did actually interview for GM with the Vikings. He didn't get it, but he's a rising star as far as executive goes in this league. And if the Giants have any sort of success, this guy is going to be a general manager in the next 3 years. I mean, it's only a matter of time. Now, I just can't wait for this team to be at a point because it looks like we're all in lockstep here. We're all in agreement that we have to have depth. The Bills, they have depth. The Eagles, they have depth on the lines of scrimmage. That's what we got to have. That's what we got to have 100%. Even more than you need your superstars, you need depth. You need your good players on the bench that can come in there and play good. Okay, so moving on. Also, he talks about how he presents prospects to the coaches along with their strengths and weaknesses, pretty much doing the work before it gets to the coach to tell the coach, like, this is exactly what his strengths or weaknesses are. This is how you can use this guy. Doing the work before it gets to the coach to make that a lot easier on the coach when they're evaluating the prospect. They pretty much talk about how he's tailoring that evaluation of the prospect specifically for the coach, which isn't new. Joe Schoen talked a little bit about that, but also talked about getting just generally good players. So I think both of those perspectives in the front office for us are going to balance each other out. And a little bit of his history. Started as a recruiting assistant for Boston, as a recruiting specialist at Boston College. He played football a little bit before that in college, realized he wasn't going to the league. So he started as a recruiting assistant, ended up going to the Jets after that, went a couple of places after that, ended up on the Eagles in 2017, and he's worked his way up since 2012 in the NFL, all the way up to being the director of player personnel in 2020. So good amount of experience, not as much experience all the way at the top, but a good amount of experience. So he looks like a really good candidate. I can't wait to see what he does here. I'm happy that Joe Schoen brought another bright executive into this building because it seems like the rest of the guys we had in the building were kind of So having another bright mind in here is going to make the Giants a lot better as far as the front office goes. You guys let me know what you're thinking of Brandon Brown. I was excited to see this. It was a pleasant surprise, and we'll see how this ends up going. Hopefully, this guy ends up taking a GM job within the next 3 years because that means that he provided a lot of value and helped the Giants win a ton of football games. If you made it this deep into the video, come on, just hit the subscribe button. I make Giants content primarily, draft content secondarily, and During the season, I'm going to be doing a lot of reacting to pretty much most of the NFL games and everything NFL. So if you made it this deep, go ahead and join the D6 squad.